Scenes of unmitigated disaster and career-immolating humiliation unfolded in excruciating fashion this morning as Donald Trump's beleaguered attorney Alina Habba was unceremoniously fired on the spot, weeping uncontrollably as security physically removed her from high-stakes proceedings immediately after a cringe-worthy courtroom debacle. Even seasoned legal experts are calling one of the most profound implosions of professional incompetence they've ever witnessed. What was intended to be mere routine preliminary hearings laying out guidelines for the former president's upcoming trials on various alleged criminal charges instead devolved into an unprecedented public dismantling for the 41-year-old New Jersey lawyer, who blundered into a catastrophic blend of astonishing unpreparedness, violating basic procedures, and staging a humiliating meltdown spiraling from yelled recriminations all the way through hysterical hysterics. I've covered countless high-profile trials and their adjoining sideshows over the past 3 decades, but I can say with confidence that this ranks among the most mortifying public courtroom disgraces an attorney's ever inflicted on their own credibility, remarked longtime trials correspondent Herb Walker, whose award-winning career has seen everything from white Bronco car chases to the O.J. Simpson acquittal circus over 25 years observing celebrity litigation. We're talking about a woman who was ostensibly selected to serve as the public face of the former United States president's legal team, finding new subterranean rock bottoms of rookie-level ignorance for basic operating practices every passing minute she remained upright, only to then compound that failure by devolving into the emotional fortitude of an infant throwing a tantrum from sheer denial of her shortcomings. According to multiple eyewitness accounts and courtroom transcripts from today's now derailed proceedings, the train wreck began almost immediately after Habba was first called by the bench to conduct introductory formalities. Upon identifying herself as representing Trump against the special counsel's allegations of mishandling classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, the former general counsel for an online bullion dealer immediately sparked confusion among the presiding judge and fellow prosecutors by improperly invoking her client's name as the president throughout her responses, despite routinely being admonished and corrected that he did not, in fact, currently hold any official White House title or capacity. She just kept right on insisting Trump was still serving when prompted on basic identifiers, said Walker. It was literally Judge Raymond Dearie politely reminding her, "No, Ms. Habba, he is the former president, as you're well aware." We in the press gallery all sort of exchanged perplexed looks, wondering if this was some kind of Lionel Hutz-level clarion signal she had no business being here, if even the most basic semantics seemed lost on her from the very start. From there, Habba only accelerated her downward spiral over the next 90 torturous minutes. She persistently used incorrect technical monikers for legal filings and case citations while making her arguments. She repeatedly mangled routine procedural terminology and invoked improper Florida civil practice rules rather than federal judicial codes of criminal procedure for which she was ostensibly retained as counsel. At one point, she could be overheard bluntly asking the former president's son Eric Trump to remind her of the specific statutes at play after admitting, "All these big numbers being thrown around had me a little spun." But it was Habba's third botched attempt at requesting broader evidence admissibility guidelines where her reputation among peers all but extinguished herself on the pyre of self-inflicted credibility reduction, unwittingly quoting case law overruled over a quarter-century ago and struggling to articulate even basic exceptions to evidentiary hearsay protocols. Indeed, video footage captured Habba frantically shuffling through her disheveled boxes of files as sweat became visible soaking through her blouse while shooting a series of visibly panicked glances toward Trump and his family seated in the gallery. That poor woman started paging through what looked like boilerplate real estate deposition stacks and half-highlighted Hein online printouts completely irrelevant to the instant case, growing more visibly overwhelmed and confused with every mistake only compounding exponentially upon the last, recounted legal analyst Alan Hellman, who's covered Trump's legal woes since the earliest days of the Russia investigation. You could literally see the floor crumbling out from underneath her as proceedings grew increasingly hapless. It was shortly thereafter that Habba herself finally appeared conscious of just how far depths of unpreparedness had compromised her credibility in the room. And rather than remaining composed under the considerable duress, transcripts show she began descending into a spiral of defensive hysterics more befitting a petulant child than a sordid legal professional. According to records, she vented audibly to an aide, "What are they asking me? This isn't what we rehearsed," before snapping at prosecutors to stop throwing big words at me like it's my fault you shysters go to law schools to confuse everybody. Several testimonies indicate it was this jarring slight that finally provoked the presiding officer to politely but firmly instruct Haba to regain professional composure. However, instead of acknowledging the warning, she proceeded to inexplicably melt down entirely, unleashing a torrent of recriminations at her own client Trump for allegedly failing to properly prepare her for court proceedings. All hell broke loose once this bewildered woman somehow convinced herself she'd become so discombobulated solely due to lackadaisical client shepherding and made that grievance known in front of everyone there, said Walker, still sounding bewildered, recounting the stunning turn of events. Haba quite literally started angrily thumping her fist while screaming things like, "You did this to me," and "Not my fault your documents were FG all over," to Mr. Trump just for having the audacity to hire such inadequate counsel to begin with. "There was absolutely no putting that barn fire back in now," continued Hellman. She accused Trump of failing to properly orient her on the pertinent facts of the alleged offenses and investigation records his team had already covered with prosecutors. She told him she felt set up to fall flat on my face in big top circus show. I mean, at that point there was no going back to pleading her client's case. This was a complete emotional meltdown targeting the former president himself as though he'd swindled her rather than vice versa. At that juncture, video records confirm Haba's outbursts crescendoed into entirely removing her suit jacket and shouting she would not be humiliated for your mistakes to Trump while angrily unbuttoning her blouse past the point of professionalism. Courtroom marshals issued 2 formal advisories that she was risking being found in contempt of court before the waterworks truly unleashed on the former president's attorney. Within minutes, Haba had completely disrobed her suit while physically and emotionally melted into a puddle of mascara-streaked convulsions on the floor, incoherently sobbing, "I'm a FG good lawyer," over and over in the fetal position. Let's just say that by the time poor Alina dissolved into a defeated tangle of strings from her blouse across the ground like some courtroom burlesque routine gone horribly awry, the esteemed bench had already seen more flesh than most stag parties, said Walker with a discernible tone of sheepish discomfort in his voice. That's how clearly this debacle had laid bare her shambolic shortcomings as an attorney to conduct herself with even basic professionalism, much less competence, and we're talking front row seats to how the sausage became completely unmade. At that point, Haba's hysterical eruption of bewildered fury and self-pity had officially plunged the courthouse into such a disruptive circus atmosphere. The bench was left with no choice but to not only declare proceedings in recess, but demand the former president relieve his counsel of duties on the spot and escort her off the premises entirely. Indeed, after calling multiple 10-minute recesses with no observable recovering of Haba's ability to reasonably resume representing her client coherently, Judge Deary gave her a final notice. One more tantrum would require her full removal from court, before promptly sending her on the unceremonious walk of absolute professional obliteration. I'll never be able to erase the image of Alina Haba being physically restrained and carried out of Judge Deary's courtroom by 3 U.S. Marshals like a manic escaped psychiatric patient, just completely disheveled and struggling against them between loud heaving